Hey guys, this is Ashley Cole. Today I wanted to talk to you about some basic comma rules. Throughout the semester we're going to go over different rules for commas. There are quite a few, but if you can understand these basic comma rules, you'll pretty much do well on your grammar in writing and things like that. So let's go over these basic comma rules. Now in order to understand the basic comma rules, you have to know the difference between a phrase and a clause, okay? So first things first, let's look at a phrase. A phrase is a group of words without both a subject and a verb, okay? So, in other words, a phrase can have no subject and no verb. A phrase can have a subject, or a phrase can have a verb, but it cannot have both a subject and a verb. So our first example, the young man in red suspenders. We have a subject, which is man, but we have no verb. So this is considered a phrase. Okay. Our next example, around the house, in the corner. These are actually two prepositional phrases put together. Around the house, in the corner. There is no subject, there is no verb. So this is considered a phrase. The next example, walking down the hill at midnight. We have a verb, yes, but we do not have a subject as well. So this is considered a phrase. So keep in mind that a phrase is a group of words without both a subject and a verb. So we know what a phrase is. Let's look at what a clause is next. Clauses are groups of words with both a subject and a verb. If I don't have both a subject and a verb, it is considered a phrase, correct? So let's look at our first example. Number one, I smiled. Very short, only two words, but it has both a subject, I, and a verb, smiled. So since it has both a subject and a verb, it is considered a clause, okay? The next example, he laughed at me, okay? He is my subject, laughed is my verb. I have both a subject and a verb, so this is considered a clause, okay? Now, there are two different types of clauses. There are independent clauses and there are dependent clauses. Independent clauses are clauses that can stand alone as sentences. Dependent clauses are clauses that cannot stand alone as sentences. So let me write that in here. Independent clauses are clauses that can stand alone as sentences. So for example, I smiled. We used this one earlier. I smiled. It's very short. There are only two words in it. It has both a subject, I, and a verb, smiled. It can stand alone as a sentence. It's a very short sentence. It's not very descriptive, but nonetheless, it is a sentence. So this is considered an independent clause. The next sentence, I love English composition, don't you? Okay? I love English composition. I have a subject, I have a verb, love. Okay? I love English composition. That can stand alone as a sentence. So this is considered an independent clause. Okay? The next type of clause that we have is called a dependent clause. So what do you think this is? This is just the opposite of an independent clause. If it's a dependent clause, it is a clause that cannot stand alone as a sentence. So I'm going to write that down for you. Okay, so a dependent clause or dependent clauses are clauses that cannot stand alone as sentences. So let's look at these examples. Because my homework was incomplete. First of all, is it a clause? Yes. I have both a subject, homework, and a verb, was. So it is a clause. The next thing that I have to ask myself is, can this stand alone as a sentence? No, it can't. Because my homework was incomplete, what, right? So because it cannot stand alone as a sentence, this is considered a dependent clause. The next example that we have, since I was in the process of moving, okay? First of all, let's ask ourselves, is this a clause? Well, does it have both a subject and a verb? Yes. I was, okay? My subject is I, my verb is was. I know that it's a clause. The second thing I need to do is I need to look at it and say, can this stand alone as a sentence? No, it can't. Since I was in the process of moving, what, right? That sentence, there's something missing out of it. It's not right. It can't stand all by itself. It needs something else at the end of it. So because this is, because this cannot stand alone as a sentence, this is considered a dependent clause. So let's review over these really quickly one more time. So in order to understand the basic comma rules, I need to know what a phrase is and what a clause is. And I also need to know the difference between independent clauses and dependent clauses. Okay? A phrase is a group of words without both a subject and a verb. A clause is a group of words with both a subject and a verb. Okay? Independent clauses are clauses that are sentences. Dependent clauses are groups of words that have both a subject and a verb, but do not stand alone or cannot stand alone as complete sentences. If you can get these basic concepts, you got it. It's no problem from here. Okay, so let's go over these rules. First of all, if I have an independent clause, so I have an independent clause here, I love running marathons. And then I have another independent clause. It gives me a chance to work out. There are a couple of things that I can do whenever I have two independent clauses in a sentence. The first thing that I can do is I can put a comma and a coordinating conjunction between the two. Well, what is a coordinating conjunction? I have them listed here for you. Basically, conjunctions, I don't know if you remember watching Schoolhouse Rock when you were younger, but all that they do is they hook up words, they can hook up phrases, and they can hook up clauses. Okay, they join those things together. So this is a list of the coordinating conjunctions: and, or, for, nor, but, yet, so. So if I have two independent clauses in a sentence, I can put a comma and a coordinating conjunction between them. So I have, I love running marathons. It gives me a chance to work out. What can I do between those? I can put a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Let's look at another one. Okay, so we have another example here. I have one independent clause. I drove to the store today. Right, there's one independent clause. I have another independent clause. I purchased some milk and bread. These are both independent clauses because they're both considered sentences by themselves. Okay, what I've done here is I've put between them a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Okay, so that's basic comma rule number 1. The second rule involving clauses. If I have two independent clauses, I can put a period between them. And this makes logical sense because an independent clause is a sentence. So if I have two together, I can split them with a period. Okay? So this one, I love running marathons, period. It gives me a chance to work out. Easy, easy. Let's take the other one for example. I drove to the store today. Okay. I drove to the store today. There's one independent clause. I purchased some milk and bread. Okay. I have two independent clauses, two sentences. I can split them with a period. Okay. The third thing that I can do with independent clauses okay, is I can put a semicolon between the two, okay? I can put a semicolon between the two independent clauses. Now there's a little trick to this. I can only put a semicolon if the two sentences are associated with one another or if they go together. So for example, if we take the example that we had earlier, I love running marathons. It gives me a chance to work out. Let's take this one. Oops. Okay. I love running marathons. It gives me a chance to work out. I can put a comma and a coordinating conjunction between here. I can put a period between here, or I can put a semicolon, because these two sentences relate to one another. They're talking about the same thing, okay? The other example, I drove to the store yesterday. Okay, I drove to the store yesterday. I purchased some milk and bread. I have two independent clauses. They're related to one another, so I can put a semicolon between the two, okay? So these are my first three basic comma rules, okay? The next rule that I want to talk about is, what if we have an independent clause and a dependent clause? If I have an independent clause and a dependent clause, I don't have to do anything. So let's look at an example of a dependent clause. What do we have up here? Let's see. Okay, because my homework was incomplete. Let's look at that one. Okay. Because my homework was incomplete, that is a dependent clause, right? It has both a subject and it has a verb, but it can't stand alone as a sentence. Let's put a dependent clause in front of that. Naturally, because my homework was incomplete, what happened? I received a 0 because my homework was incomplete. So here I have a dependent clause because my homework was incomplete. In front of that, I have an independent clause. I received a 0. If I have an independent clause in front of a dependent clause, I just leave it alone. I don't touch it. I don't mess with it. It's fine. The little tricky part comes in is whenever I have to reverse that order, whenever I have a dependent clause first and an independent clause second, what do you think that I do? Now, I know this is weird. I know it doesn't really make sense, but if you reverse it, you can actually kind of hear a pause in there. But I know this is silly, but this is the rule. If I switch that order, if I have a dependent clause first and an independent clause second, I put a comma after the dependent clause. So let's flip this sentence around. I received a 0 because my homework was incomplete. Let's flip it around and see how this works. Okay, so here I've just switched the order of the sentence that I have up here. Because my homework was incomplete, I received a 0. Okay, so I have a dependent clause first, and I have an independent clause second. If I have a dependent clause and I have an independent clause after it, I need to put a comma there. Okay, so guys, this is basically it. I know that it may seem like a lot at first to understand, but like I said, if you can just understand these Basic principles. This is going to really help you with your commas. A lot of you are having trouble with this. I'm going to share this with you in Google Drive, okay? So you will be able to see all of what I've posted here today. But remember, you need to know the difference between a phrase and a clause. You need to know the two types of clauses, independent and dependent clauses. You need to know what those are, okay? And I've given you examples here, right? And then from there, I have the rules here for you, and I'm going to put them on Google Drive for you. If I have an independent clause and another independent clause, I can split these with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. I can split two independent clauses with a period, or I can split two related independent clauses with a semicolon. Okay. Rule 4 says if I have an independent clause plus a dependent clause, I don't have to do anything. But rule number 5, if I have a dependent clause and then an independent clause, I have to separate those two items with a comma. I hope so much that this has helped you, but after you look at it, if you have other questions about it, I will be happy to help you. So please contact me if you have further questions, and we'll get right to it, and we'll make sure that you understand it for your next writing assignment. All right, thanks so much and good luck.